this next activity is going to be an activity that is pulled out of the cookbook on, if you have the current one, it's page 57 in that cookbook, and it's called a 17 by 17 lightning talk. Now, this is one of those activities that I never think to use, and it wasn't until we did a train the trainer recently when I asked people, what activity would you use for this? And people were like, "Oh, wait, what is a 17 by 17 lightning talk?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that was even in the cookbook." So this is an activity. If you have like content that you want to share and tell a story about, but you have lots of other things you need to get to too, this is a good way to keep everything tight and in a box. And the way this works is you set up 17 slides, and each slide is set to auto advance after 17 seconds. And so what's going to happen, and I'm going to model this for you, is there's going to be this is one of those things where you can't just kind of wing it. You have to be prepared for this a little bit because the 17 seconds, it's unforgiving. You're going to see this is hands-free. The slides are set to auto advance. And so if I don't get through everything in 17 seconds, it doesn't matter. The slide's going forward anyway. I'm just going to model this talking a little bit about training activities and this cookbook in general. But as I do this, I'd love for you to be listening to me, but also I want you to be thinking about, I wonder how this could fit in one of my training sessions. Like, is there something that I need to talk to, but I can't go on too long, or I don't want people to go on too long about this because we have activities or we have other things to get to. So here we go. And I'll give you a warning that this is really a difficult style to get participation in, but right from the start in that first slide, I'm going to ask for some participation in the chat box. So don't let me down. Go ahead and throw some things into that chat box. It's really a yes or no question. So let's go ahead and get started. And these next 17 slides are set to auto advance. And so here we go. So when it comes to training activities, I'd love for you to type yes or no into that chat box if you have go-to activities that you fall back on time and time again. And I'm just seeing yes across the board. I see one person said no, and I wonder if they're just trying to be funny. But so go-to activities, I have lots. One of my go-to opening activities is called Think of a Time When. And so this is an activity where you ask people to think of a time when they did something, or think of their best experience or worst experience with the topic that's at hand. And sometimes that's just a way for people to connect into the content. But sometimes I have go-to activities for content itself. And one of my favorites is called How I See It. And you'll see in this picture that people get a card and then they need to discuss whether or not they think that card is true or false. We're going to get a chance to see this activity a little bit later during today's session. I have so many go-to activities. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see an activity that's called a messy start, which I use a lot of times to start activities. On the bottom, you see people using sticky notes to put things in order. On the top, you see note card voting. So I'm taking polls in person. But what happens when we get to the second or third time with the same group of people? We can't use the same audience. It makes me want to hide. It would be embarrassing to always have to use the same activities time and time again. Sometimes I will rack my brain and inspiration strikes. Over on the left-hand side, you see a game that we've created called Train the Trainer the Game, based on a game that we've played before. Or on the right-hand side, you see, I came up with inspiration for this on a run where people have to put a puzzle together to open a lockbox, and it's a team building activity. We don't always have to think of these though. Sometimes we go to Google or we can go to ChatGPT and we can get literally hundreds, thousands of different activities. The issue is, are they the right activities? One of the resources that my favorite resource was for virtual sessions. My colleague Cassie Labori and her husband Tom Stone wrote a book called Interact and Engage, and this has 75 different activities for virtual training. It's just curated right there for you, and I love that model. And so that's kind of what we had the inspiration for our cookbook. These are classroom activities all in one spot, and they're not any sort of activities. There's actually a rhyme and reason to these activities. And I'm going to talk about each of the steps that you'll see for these activities. So for these activities, there's a structure that we've organized these activities. So instead of going to Google where you can get lots of activities that may or may not be appropriate, here you can go with the intent. And we have a four-step training model that we use. And when you're thinking of these activities, some of them you might want to use, and some of them you may never want to use. Similar to a cookbook, there's recipes in cookbooks that you love and go to time and time again, and some of them you'll never turn to those pages, and that's totally okay. With our model, basically what we have is anchor content application feature use. The first set of activities are these anchor activities. How do we dip our toes into the waters of the content without overwhelming our learners first? And then once they're connected to the content, they can get into the information that you want to share, the new stuff, the new concepts that you want to introduce them to. And they'll have a way to kind of ground that in their own understanding. But these content activities, they don't have to just be lecture. There's lots of other thoughts and activities. Of course, then we need to go into, do our learners get it? And those are the application activities. There's probably more application activities than any other activities because there's lots of different contexts and objectives that we want to check to see whether or not people are getting it. We need the right activity for that. And finally, we need to remember that our learners are not going to memorize everything that we taught them during our training session. So we need some activities that help our learners carry this learning outside. These are the future use activities before we wrap things up. Now, when I do a train the trainer session, sometimes people ask, well, do I need to choose one activity from each of these categories in order to make a good training? And the answer is not necessarily. So these activities will fit together, but sometimes they overlap. Sometimes a content activity can also be an application activity. But when it comes to go-to activities, if your go-to activities are getting stale, or if you're just looking for a new challenge, if you take nothing else away from today's session, you have this cookbook that will give you all sorts of ideas for new activities to try out. So that is the 17 by 17 lightning talk. And I just want to pause there before we go on to the next activity. I'd love to hear, is there a topic or is there content that you think this could be helpful for your own training? Go ahead and put that into the chat because I'm kind of curious how other people could use an activity like this to deliver content but not get bogged down into the details. The 17 by 17 format forces you to simplify things because if we have some concepts, sometimes we can drone on about it for a long time and our learners can get confused or lost in the details. So this really forces you to keep things tight. Um, so I'm just kind of taking a look at the chat. We could use this for safety training. When reviewing examples, activity would be great with step two training after the basic or base information has been given. Absolutely. Or sometimes it can be used to give some of the base information and then you can build upon it there as well. So I'm seeing all sorts of thoughts in there. I'm seeing people actually take a look at the table of contents and comment on some of the other activities as well.